almost 35 years. And everybody asks, why do I do that? Well, it's kind of a complicated, long story, but I have to start off by when I first got into this business. How many here are firefighters? How many are paramedics? How many are EMTs? Okay. The very first ride-along I ever did with LA County Fire was with Bob Beliveau and Rocky Dokes. Now, the reason why I mention them by name is because Bob and Rocky were two of the very first 13 paramedics in all of California, and arguably in the country. So you can imagine how nervous I was, sandwiched in between these two guys running red lights and siren down the street. We arrived at a scene where this 12, 13-year-old boy had been hit and hit on his bike and run over by this delivery truck, one of those delivery trucks we all see around, big white trucks with the dual back wheels. Well, those dual back wheels rolled over his abdomen and his pelvis. And I don't know what I thought my experience was going to be on my very first ride along, but I can tell you this, I wasn't prepared for the trauma before me. I was stunned. I was shocked. I couldn't speak. I couldn't, all I could do was just stand there and stare down at this little boy as Bob and Rocky were hunched over and trying to stem the internal bleeding and getting prepped and ready for transport. And as I was watching him, I watched this little boy look up, and he was looking from one firefighter to the next firefighter to the next firefighter. And I began to realize that he was trying to make eye contact. And I guess my captain saw that too. He was standing sort of in front of me and off to the left a little bit. And he bent down to this little boy and he said, "Hey buddy, how you doing?" And the little boy, gasping for air, scared to death, in his terrified little voice said, "Am I gonna die?" My captain said, "No buddy, you're not gonna die, not on my watch." I watched that little boy get better right before my eyes. Now, I don't know whether that little boy survived his injuries or not. LA is a big city and follow-up is rare. But I do know this, that at that moment, that verbal placebo made that little boy feel better. What firefighters and paramedics and EMTs, ER doctors and ER nurses, what they do in the field and the decisions that they make, well, it isn't just about working with an incredible list of high-tech, 21st century, cutting-edge equipment. And they have this at their fingertips. And don't get me wrong, everything that is used out in that field helps save lives. But I realized that what firefighters and paramedics and EMTs, what they really do, what their real job is, 95% of the time, is that they care for people, real people, with real problems and real feelings. And they're right there in front of you. All that equipment that you have splayed out in front of you, it can't analyze and assess the situation. Only you can do that. All that equipment can't start an IV. Only you can do that. All that equipment can't reach out and put a hand on a little boy's shoulder and say, "No, buddy, you're not going to die, not on my watch." To truly care for people, you have to truly care for people. And you've got to show them that you care. You have to look up from all that equipment that you have splayed out in front of you. And you have to look that person in the eyes, and you have to say to them, with all the compassion you have in your heart, that they're not alone, that you're there to help them. And granted, that's not always easy. I know that. I get that, especially when you're dealing with highly charged emotional moments, or when you're dealing with a frequent flyer at 2 o'clock in the morning, or when people show you no respect, when people you're dealing with are drunk, high, smelly, abusive, or sometimes just not all there. It's not easy when bureaucracy and red tape and unsafe working conditions, low pay, sometimes no pay, dog you on your every run. It's a tough job what they do. It's tough physically, mentally, emotionally, financially. It's tough on their families too, but yet they still do it. Why? I believe that firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, ER doctors, ER nurses are hardwired to do what they do. Courage, compassion, care. It's in their DNA. It's in their blood. I read a line in a book once, written by Tom Dick, a paramedic. He said, "A good teacher can teach you the best medicine in the world, but not even the most brilliant teacher can teach you the things you have to have in your heart." For example, on another run that I had with Bob and Rocky with LA County, and this was not a medical call, it was a fire call. And we responded with an engine to a low-income trailer park in South LA. And whether you've been there or not, just know that that's a pretty rough area of town, pretty depressed. And it was in the winter, and a woman's wall heater caught fire in her 30-foot trailer. And one whole side, when we arrived, one whole side of the trailer was fully engulfed. And it only took a minute or so to knock it down, but the damage was done. The whole left side of that trailer was sort of burned out. It had just sort of melted away, rendering that trailer uninhabitable. And the woman was crying, and she was saying to the captain that she had no other place to go. And the captain was very sympathetic. And he said, "I understand, but my hands are tied. There's nothing I can do." And he had to seal the trailer. So we went up, and Bob and Rocky and I went up, and a couple other firefighters. We got these big old sheets of plastic off the rig, and we draped it over the trailer, and we taped it down, effectively sealing the trailer. And but Bob and Rocky both knew that the minute we left, she was going to go back in. It was her home. She had no other place to go. So Bob reached into his bunker gear, looked around, pulled out a buck knife, and he slit an entryway for her. And Rocky went up to one of the rigs, and he grabbed a handful of blankets and a flashlight. And they both slipped them through the slit and walked away. And Bob got a few paces away from the trailer, and he stopped, and he turned around, and he stared at the trailer for a long moment. Then he turned around, and he looked at me, and he said, "Always turn around and ask yourself, what more can I do for that person?" You know, he wasn't doing that to impress me. And I was looking him straight in the eye, and I have a pretty good BS meter. Now that was coming from someplace deep down inside. Bob Beliveau was letting his DNA show. But you know, just because it's in Bob and Rocky's DNA to help people, and just because it's in some of you, in your DNA to help people, that doesn't mean that they're not going to get frustrated and discouraged. They run the risk of burnout just like everybody else. Firefighters and paramedics and EMTs, they see so much of the dark side of life. They see more death and despair and pathos and poignancy in a week than most people see in a lifetime. So I can understand how easy it is to stop looking at the faces of your patients, stop listening to their sad stories, to look at them as nuisances, problems, instead of as people. But you know, when you do that, you stop caring and you start judging. Judging is not your job. For example, I was in, well, I'm not going to tell you what city I was in because I don't want you to think that this is prevalent in that city when I know for a fact it's not. But I was in a large city. And I was standing on the street talking with an old friend of mine that I hadn't seen in a while. We just had lunch. Standing on the street, just talking with him, talking about old times, good times, bad times. And I heard these sirens coming down the street, coming down the boulevard, and I looked up, I see this big old ladder truck go by, red light siren. Pretty soon he's followed by a pumper. Then a paramedic wagon goes by, a couple more engines go by, and they all went down the street about 2 blocks, turned to the right, cut their sirens. Well, by this time, my friend, Brendan, realized he had lost my attention. And he said, well, I suppose you want to go down there and see what that's all about, right? I said, well, yeah, don't you? He said, no. Like I said, it's a DNA thing. And I said, well, come on, let's go down and see what your tax dollars are doing for you. So we walked down there. They'd already set up a police line. And right away, I saw a couple paramedics on the street dealing with somebody. And whenever I go out on these calls, I still ride out with LA County an awful lot. So I'm real curious what kind of equipment they have, what kind of equipment other cities have. And I'm sitting here kind of daydreaming about, I'm seeing this one paramedic, and he's hunched over a victim, a patient. And at first I thought he was talking to the patient, but all of a sudden he turned his head and I realized, whoa, he's got Bluetooth on. Look at that, Bluetooth. Me and Roy used to carry around that 12-pound orange box. This guy's got a Bluetooth and he's talking to the hospital with his hands free. Well, I hope he was talking to the hospital anyway. Anyway, so as I'm sitting there kind of staring at the equipment that they were pulling out of the rig and all the other firefighters kind of milling around, all of a sudden I realized that this paramedic was staring at me. Pretty soon he started to point at me. And he goes, yo, you're that guy, right? You're that guy. And I was like, oh. He goes, come here. So Brendan and I walked over. And he turns to his partner and he says, yo, you know who this guy is? Do you know who this guy is? And his partner looks up with this puzzled look and said, nope. He said, this is Johnny Gage, man. This is Johnny Gage. And the guy says, okay, all right. Nice to meet you, Johnny. And he went back down to the victim. And he goes, he's an idiot. He doesn't know. He's too young, you know. And so I kind of wanted to get the attention off of me. So I said, well, what do you got? He said, he tried to commit suicide by jumping off the second floor. Then he turns to the guy. He's laying there on the ground, still awake, in shock, I'm sure, but still awake. And he holds up 4 fingers. And he said, you want to off yourself, pal. You got to make it to the 4th floor. Now, I know that's funny. That's probably the way I'm telling it. But I got to tell you, it probably wasn't very funny to the guy that was laying on the sidewalk. You know, and humor is really important. It's what keeps you from going crazy. And I get that, because there's a lot of stuff that firefighters and paramedics and EMTs see out there. So it's important. But that kind of humor, that has to stay in the house. You can't have civilians hearing that. They don't understand that. Because it was pretty harsh. You know, it was, you know, Brendan, as we were walking away a little while later, he even turned to me and said, man, that was kind of harsh. And I spent an hour telling him what paramedic burnout was, what firefighter burnout is. And I said to him, that guy was probably a good paramedic. Who knows, he might have even been a brilliant paramedic. But on that particular day, he was burned out. His partner or his captain wasn't looking out for him. Because on that particular day, he shouldn't have been on the street. He was judged. Judging wasn't his job. How do you keep burnout at bay? How do you overcome those times in your life when you